Picture a man, 36 years old, handsome, successful, a senior position at a major corporation. The kind of man who climbed the career ladder before most people even found the first rung. Money came easy to him, so he spent it just as easily. Designer suits, luxury watches, the finest things. Why save when tomorrow always promised more? Women couldn't say no to him, and he never said yes. Not really. One-night stands, beds left before sunrise, names forgotten by Monday. He'd never had a girlfriend, not once in 36 years. Why commit when everything came so effortlessly? Then one morning, he walked into his office. Whispers stopped mid-sentence. Eyes darted away. And at the entrance, 2 police officers were waiting. Handcuffs clicked around his wrist in front of everyone he'd ever impressed. 3 years later, when he sat across from me, he wasn't the same man. His hair was gone, his body had changed, his heart was failing. His eyes, they were already dead. He asked me one question: can a single night destroy an entire life? I looked at him and asked, was that night truly a mistake? Or was it a trap someone built just for you? He didn't answer, but his lip trembled. His eyes flickered, a spark of something, then nothing. In that tremor, I saw the weight of years he hadn't spoken about. This man's story didn't begin that night. It reached back much further, into much darker places. And I didn't know yet that in this story, the person I thought was guilty might be the victim, and the one I assumed was the victim might be something else entirely. In some sessions, my patients heal as they talk, but some stories, they stay with me. Today, I'm going to tell you one of those lives. If you're listening to this and there are things inside you that you can't contain, share what's going through your mind in the comments and tell me where you're listening from. I read every comment. I hear every story. If you want to know about the therapy stories I can't forget, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If this story touches something in you, you can support me by liking. One day I'd like to hear your story too. If you want me to share your story in my next video, you can send it to the email address in my profile. Remember, our stories heal, even just a little, when they're shared. Before I tell you what happened to this man, I need you to understand something. When he first walked into my office, I didn't see a monster. I didn't see a predator. I saw someone who had been hollowed out from the inside, like a building that looks intact from the street but has been gutted by fire. His name was Daniel, and the first thing I noticed wasn't his weight gain or his baldness or his pallid skin. It was the way he sat down, slowly, carefully, as if his bones might shatter if he moved too fast. This was a man who had learned to make himself small. "Dr. Bennett," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. He cleared his throat. Tried again. "I don't know why I'm here." But he did know. They always know. The question is whether they're ready to say it out loud. When patients claim not to know why they've come, it's rarely confusion. It's a defense mechanism. The conscious mind isn't ready to confront what the unconscious already knows. Daniel's statement told me he was standing at the edge of something he'd been avoiding for years, and part of him had finally decided to jump. My job was to make sure I caught him. "Why don't you start with what brought you here today?" I said. "Not 3 years ago. Today." He stared at a point somewhere behind my shoulder. His fingers, I noticed they were thick now, the hands of someone who worked with them, curled into his palms. "Someone from my old company called me last week," he said. "A man named Richard. He told me she did it again." She. The word hung in the air like smoke. She? Daniel's jaw tightened. Something shifted behind his eyes. A flash of rage, quickly buried. "Emily. Her name was Emily." He paused. "Maybe still is. I don't know if she's still there." The way he said her name, not with hatred, not with fear, but with something more complex. Something that sounded almost like grief. The ambivalence in his voice was significant. Victims' false accusations often develop complicated emotional relationships with their accusers. There's anger, certainly, but also a strange form of intimacy. This person changed the entire trajectory of your life. In some ways, they know you better than anyone, because they understood exactly where to strike to bring you down. "Tell me about Emily," I said. Daniel's breathing changed, shorter, shallower. His body was telling me what his words wouldn't, not yet. "She was nice. At first, everyone said she was nice." His hands opened, closed, opened again. She was the kind of person who remembered your coffee order, who asked about your weekend and actually listened to the answer. She'd leave little notes on people's desks, birthday cards, that kind of thing. And with you specifically? A sound escaped him, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. With me, she was more. She'd bring me lunch when I forgot to eat. She'd stay late to help with my projects even when she didn't have to. She'd find excuses to come to my office. Did you encourage this? Daniel looked at me directly for the first time. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. That's what everyone asks. Did I lead her on? Did I give her signals? Dr. Bennett, I was polite. I was professional. I didn't treat her any differently than I treated anyone else. He swallowed. Maybe that was the problem. I leaned forward slightly. What do you mean? I mean, I treated her like everyone else, like she was invisible unless she was useful. His voice dropped. I treated all of them like that. Every woman. They were just there, for a night, for an hour. I never saw them as people who could want something from me, something real. This was the first crack in Daniel's armor, an admission of his own emotional unavailability. Many men who engage in patterns of casual intimacy do so not from a place of power, but from a deep-seated inability to form genuine connections. The question forming in my mind wasn't just about what Emily did to him, but why he had built a life where such an attack could destroy everything. A man with real relationships, real support systems, real connections. He might have survived this differently. So Emily wanted something real, I said. And you couldn't give her that. I couldn't give anyone that. Daniel's hands were shaking now. But she thought, she believed that if she just tried hard enough, I would change. That I would see her. Really see her. What happened the night of the dinner? Daniel went still. Not the stillness of calm, but the stillness of a prey animal that has just caught a predator's scent. She asked me to dinner, he said finally. I said yes because, I don't know why. Maybe I was bored. Maybe I was curious. Maybe some part of me knew what she wanted and thought. He stopped, started again. I thought it would be easy, like it always was. Take me through that evening. From the beginning. He closed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice had changed, flatter, more distant, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized against his will. We went to a restaurant she chose. Nice place. Expensive. She dressed up. Really dressed up. I remember thinking she looked different outside the office. Softer somehow. He opened his eyes. She talked the whole time about her life, her dreams, her family. I nodded. I smiled. I did what I always do. Which is nothing. I did nothing. I let her fill the silence because I had nothing to say, nothing real anyway. After dinner, she invited me to her apartment, said she wanted to show me something, some project she was working on. Me, a bitter edge crept into his voice, the oldest line in the book, and I went anyway, because that's what I did, that's who I was. What happened at her apartment? Daniel's hands moved to his knees, gripping them hard enough that his knuckles went white. We slept together. It was consensual. I swear to God it was consensual. She initiated. She wanted it. The intensity of his insistence on consent was notable. This wasn't just a statement of fact. It was a declaration he'd made thousands of times. To police, to lawyers, to himself in the mirror at 3 a.m. The trauma of being accused of assault when you know you're innocent creates its own kind of wound. The victim becomes obsessed with proving a negative, with defending a truth that can never be fully verified. It's a particular kind of psychological torture. And the next morning, I woke up before her, got dressed, and before I left, I said, He stopped. His throat worked. I said, it would be better if we didn't mention this to anyone. Why did you say that? Because that's what I always said. It was routine. Keep things separate. Don't complicate the workplace. I didn't even think about it. His voice cracked. I didn't think about her at all. What was her reaction when you said that? Daniel's face contorted with the effort of memory. She was sitting up in bed, the sheet pulled up to her chest, and she just stared at me. Didn't say anything. Her face went completely blank, like a light switching off. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was barely a whisper. I've thought about that moment every single day for 4 years, that look on her face. What was she feeling? Humiliation? Rage? Heartbreak? He shook his head slowly. I still don't know. I couldn't read her. I never learned how to read anyone. Daniel's inability to interpret Emily's emotional state spoke to a deeper pattern, what we call emotional blindness or alexithymia in mild forms. He had spent his entire adult life treating intimacy as transactional, and in doing so, he'd atrophied his capacity to recognize or respond to others' emotional needs. This didn't justify what happened to him, but it illuminated how he'd walked blindly into a situation that someone more emotionally attuned might have navigated differently. What happened when you got to work that morning? Daniel's body seemed to fold in on itself. At first, nothing. I went to my office, started my day. It was maybe 10-11 o'clock when I noticed people looking at me differently, conversations stopping when I walked by, nobody would meet my eyes. Did you ask anyone what was happening? I asked my assistant. She looked terrified, said she didn't know anything, but I could see it on her face. Everyone knew something I didn't. Then the police came? Daniel's voice had gone mechanical again, protective. 2 officers, they asked me to come with them. I asked what for. They said there had been an allegation. He laughed, a hollow, terrible sound. An allegation, such a small word for something that big. What did you feel in that moment? Confusion. Pure confusion. I thought there had been some kind of mistake. Maybe someone had reported something they'd seen and misunderstood. I actually thought... He stopped, shook his head. I actually thought I'd clear it up in an hour and be back at my desk by lunch. Daniel's initial response, the expectation of quick resolution, is common in people who have never faced serious consequences. His entire life had reinforced the belief that he could charm or negotiate his way out of any situation. The dissonance between this expectation and the reality he was about to face would have been psychologically devastating. It wasn't just the accusation that broke him, it was the collapse of his entire worldview. When did you learn what Emily had claimed? Daniel's breathing had become ragged. At the station, they told me she had filed a report that morning. She said that I had. He couldn't finish. The words stuck in his throat like broken glass. Take your time. She said I forced her. That she said no, and I didn't stop. His voice was strangled. She had gone to a doctor that morning. She had injuries, marks, evidence. I kept my face neutral, but I felt a chill. What kind of injuries? Bruises, scratches, things that looked like... He couldn't say it. The doctor's report was consistent with her story. The physical evidence supported her. But you said the encounter was consensual. It was. His eyes were wild now, desperate. There was nothing violent about it, nothing rough. I don't understand how she had those marks unless... He stopped. His face changed as the realization that had clearly haunted him for years surfaced again. Unless she did it to herself, I said quietly. Daniel nodded slowly. That's what I eventually understood. After she left me that morning, after I left her, she must have hurt herself, created the evidence, then went straight to a doctor, then to the police. The calculated nature of what Daniel was describing, if true, indicated something far more complex than a moment of rejected fury. Self-injury to fabricate evidence requires planning, determination, and a willingness to endure physical pain. This speaks to either profound psychological disturbance or a depth of premeditation that chills the blood. Either way, Emily was not simply a scorned woman lashing out. She was someone who had made a decision and executed it with precision. What happened after your arrest? Daniel's shoulders sagged. Everything happened. He began listing in a flat, dead voice. The company fired me within 48 hours. My face was all over the news, local, then picked up nationally. Corporate executive accused of assault, my name, my photo everywhere. Did you have support? Family? Friends? I had colleagues, business contacts, women I'd slept with. None of them are the same as friends, are they? He smiled grimly. My parents are dead. No siblings. The people I thought would stand by me, they disappeared. Everyone believes the accusation first. Even if you're acquitted later, the accusation is what sticks. Were you acquitted? Daniel's face twisted. No, I took a plea deal. Why would you do that if you were innocent? Because my lawyer said I would lose. The words came out bitter, corroded. It was her word against mine, and she had physical evidence. The doctor's report, the timeline. A sympathetic story about the nice girl who helped everyone and the charming executive who used her and threw her away. He shook his head. My lawyer said a jury would crucify me. So you pleaded guilty to something you didn't do. I pleaded to a lesser charge, got 2 years probation. No prison time, but... He gestured at himself. The weight, the baldness, the broken posture. This is its own kind of prison. The trauma of pleading guilty to a crime you didn't commit is particularly insidious. The legal system forces you to speak words that violate your own truth. You must stand in a courtroom and say, I did this, when every fiber of your being knows you didn't. This creates a profound internal split, a fracturing of self that can take years to heal, if it ever does. Daniel hadn't just lost his job and reputation, he'd been forced to betray himself. What happened after the legal proceedings ended? Everything fell apart in slow motion. Daniel's voice was exhausted. I sold my apartment, couldn't afford it without the job. Sold my car, burned through my savings. I had nothing put aside. Money had always come easily, remember? I never thought I'd need a cushion. What did you do for income? At first, nothing. I tried to find work in my field, but nobody would hire me. My name was poisoned. Every background check came back with the charge. Every interviewer who Googled me saw the headlines. He laughed bitterly. Then COVID hit. For almost 3 years, nothing. Absolutely nothing. How did you survive? I ate through everything I had, moved into smaller and smaller apartments. Then I started doing day labor, construction, landscaping, loading trucks. He held up his hands, callous now, rough. These used to type reports that moved millions of dollars. Now they carry bricks. How did that feel? At first, humiliating. I'd see guys on the crew who were 20 years old and they'd be faster than me, stronger than me. They'd look at me like I was some kind of curiosity. What was this soft office guy doing here? He paused. After a while, though, the physical work was almost peaceful. No thinking required. Just lift, carry, put down, repeat. Daniel's finding peace in manual labor makes psychological sense. When the mind is overwhelmed with trauma, repetitive physical activity can be grounding. It's why trauma survivors often gravitate toward exercise, gardening, or craft work. The body becomes a refuge from the mind. But this was also a form of avoidance. As long as Daniel was exhausted from physical labor, he didn't have to think about what had happened to him or why. Tell me about the changes to your body, your health. Daniel touched his head reflexively. The hair went first, started falling out in clumps about 6 months after the arrest. Stress, they said. By the end of the first year, I was bald. He pulled at his stomach. The weight came with the depression. I stopped caring what I ate. Fast food, junk, whatever was cheapest and easiest. Then my heart started having problems. Arrhythmia, high blood pressure. They say stress can do that too. Did you ever consider ending your life? The question hung in the air. Daniel didn't flinch from it. Every day for the first year, he said quietly. I had a plan, multiple plans actually. I'd think about it at night, work out the details. What method, where, whether anyone would even notice. What stopped you? Spite, he said, and something like a smile crossed his face. Pure spite. I thought, if I die, she wins. The story ends with me as the monster and her as the survivor. I couldn't let that be the ending. Spite as a survival mechanism is more common than people realize. When all other reasons for living have been stripped away, the refusal to give someone else the satisfaction of your defeat can be remarkably sustaining. It's not a healthy long-term motivation. Eventually, Daniel would need to find reasons to live that were about him, not against her, but in the darkest moments, anger can be a life raft. Tell me about Richard's phone call, the one that brought you here. Daniel sat up slightly, the first time he'd moved towards something rather than away from it during our entire session. Richard was a manager in another department. I barely knew him. We'd nod at each other in the hallway, that kind of thing. He called me out of nowhere last week, said he needed to tell me something. What did he say? He said Emily had accused him of the same thing. Last month. Same pattern. She'd shown interest, he'd turned her down, and suddenly there were allegations. Police, HR investigations, the whole nightmare. But Richard's case was different. Richard never slept with her, never even had dinner with her. He'd rejected her completely, professionally, cleanly, and she still accused him. What happened with Richard's case? He fought it. had the money, had the lawyers, and he won, completely exonerated, because there was no evidence, no dinner, no encounter, nothing, just her word against his, and his alibi was airtight. Daniel's voice cracked, and once he won, people started talking, started wondering. If she lied about Richard, maybe she lied about me too. Psychological insight. The emergence of a pattern changes everything, and nothing. For Daniel, Richard's case was both vindication and torture. It suggested his own innocence, but didn't prove it. He would never know if people believed him now, or just gave him the benefit of the doubt. He would never have his day in court, his moment of being declared innocent. The truth was out there, but it had come too late and in the wrong form to fully heal him. How did you feel when Richard told you this? Daniel was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Relieved, angry, devastated, all at once. He wiped his eyes roughly. For 4 years, I've carried this weight, the weight of everyone thinking I was a monster, and now there's proof I might not be. But what does it change? My career is gone, my health is ruined. The best years of my life were spent carrying bricks and trying not to kill myself. Did Richard offer you anything? To help with a legal case. Daniel nodded. He wanted us to sue her together. Build a case for malicious prosecution or defamation or something. He shook his head. But I can't afford it. I'm barely making rent doing office work for minimum wage. Legal battles take years and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So even now, with evidence that suggests your innocence, you can't clear your name? The truth doesn't set you free, Daniel said bitterly. Money sets you free, and I don't have any. We sat in silence for a moment. I could feel Daniel's exhaustion, but also something else, a desperate need to understand. Daniel, I want to ask you something that might be uncomfortable. He looked at me warily. Everything's uncomfortable now. Setting aside what Emily did, setting aside the accusation and everything that followed, what do you think made you the way you were? Why couldn't you form real connections? Why did you treat women as disposable? This question was essential. Daniel had been so focused on what was done to him that he hadn't examined who he was before it happened. Understanding his pre-existing patterns wasn't about blame. It was about preventing him from simply returning to the same emotional isolation if he ever rebuilt his life. The trauma had shattered his old self. This was a chance to build something better from the pieces. Daniel's face changed. The defensiveness dropped away, replaced by something raw. My mother left when I was 8, he said quietly. Just vanished, took a bag and never came back. My father told me it was because I wasn't good enough, that I was too much trouble, too needy. He swallowed. He spent the next 10 years reminding me that loving someone was dangerous, that if you let people in, they leave. So you learn not to let anyone in. I learned to take what I needed and leave first. Always leave first. Never give anyone the chance to leave you. His voice broke. And now look at me. Everyone left anyway, because of something I didn't even do. I pushed everyone away to protect myself, and in the end I was more alone than I ever could have imagined. Here was the core wound, the abandonment by his mother and the toxic messaging from his father. Daniel had built his entire adult life around avoiding the pain of rejection by rejecting first. He used women before they could use him. He never formed attachments, because attachments could be severed. What Emily did was monstrous, but it had landed on a foundation that was already cracked. His isolation meant there was no one to believe him, no one to support him, no one to catch him when he fell. Daniel, I want to tell you something important. He looked at me, waiting. What happened to you was unjust. It was cruel. You were falsely accused, and the system failed you. None of that was your fault. I paused. But the man you were before this happened, the man who couldn't connect, who used people, who lived in emotional isolation, that man was already in pain. He was already suffering. This trauma has broken you, yes, but it's also given you a chance. A chance for what? His voice was skeptical, but there was something underneath. A flicker of hope, maybe. To become someone new, someone who can feel, someone who can connect. You're in my office because you finally want to be seen, really seen, for the first time in your life. That's not weakness. That's courage. Trauma can be a doorway as well as a prison. Daniel had been forced to confront aspects of himself he'd spent decades avoiding. The comfortable life that had enabled his emotional avoidance was gone. In its place was pain, yes, but also an opportunity, if he was willing to take it, to build a life based on genuine connection rather than superficial success. This is the paradox of suffering. Sometimes we have to lose everything to find what actually matters. Daniel was crying now. Not dramatically, just tears sliding down his cheeks that he didn't bother to wipe away. "I don't know how to start," he whispered. "I don't know how to be different." "You already have," I said. "You're here. You're talking. You're letting yourself be seen. That's the beginning." I saw Daniel every week for the next 8 months. The progress was slow. It always is with wounds this deep. But it was real. He began to understand that his worth wasn't tied to his job title or his appearance or how many women wanted him. He started making genuine connections. Tentative at first, with co-workers at his new job, then with a few people who became actual friends. His health improved. Not completely. Stress had taken a permanent toll. But he lost some weight, his heart stabilized, and the constant exhaustion began to lift. He never did sue Emily. Couldn't afford it, and honestly, I'm not sure he wanted to anymore. "I don't want revenge," he told me in one of our last sessions. "I just want to stop carrying her around with me." And slowly, he began to put her down. The truth about that night will probably never be publicly known. Daniel will always live with the question mark over his name. But he's learned something most people never do, that who you are isn't determined by what others believe about you. It's determined by who you choose to become. The last time I saw him, he told me something that stayed with me. "You know what I realized?" he said. "Before all this happened, I was dead inside. I just didn't know it. It took losing everything to finally feel something." He paused. "That's not nothing." "No, it's not nothing at all." I hope this story has helped you look at your own life, your emotions, or the people around you with different eyes. I hope this story has helped you understand yourself and others a little better. I would love to hear something about you in the comments, to learn a little more about you and your story. If you want to share what's going through your mind, you can write to the email address in my profile. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can click the bell icon to turn on notifications so you'll know about the next real-life story. Before we end, I want to ask you a few questions. Take a moment to think about them. What do you think about this story? Does Daniel's journey remind you of anything in your own life, or in the lives of people you know? Do you believe Daniel was truly innocent, or does some part of you still wonder? What does it say about us that we can never fully know? Have you ever been judged for something you didn't do? How did you cope with the injustice of being misunderstood? What would you say to Daniel if you could speak to him directly? And what would you say to Emily? Do you think trauma can truly be a doorway to growth? Or is that just something we tell ourselves to survive? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Your perspective matters. Your voice matters.